Well, hello, everyone. We are back. So, this is the academic nurse, Tracy. And tonight I am super excited. We have a special guest with us. Her name is Tiffany Hull, and she is a neonatal nurse practitioner. I happen to know her a little bit. We'll talk some about how that all works. But without further ado, let's go ahead and invite her on. Tiffany, are you there?
I'm here. How are you?
Hey, friend, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm just trying to get
Good.
situated, and I was having a little dance party with your
It's
intro
always a
music.
sitch. It's always a sitch, right? So you just have to get into the groove and get where you're supposed to be. And yeah, that was kind of a Madonna reference, but yeah.
I did Vogue. I vogued just moments ago,
Did you?
so
I
it's
missed
appropriate.
it. You're
You
gonna have
did.
to do that again so I can put it on TikTok.
Oh gosh, for all the talkers.
Right, right. Have you watched any of Nurse Talk?
Mm.
Oh, we'll have to that's a whole nother conversation. We'll have to have that later.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so I asked you to come on today, because we're friends, but you're also a neonatal nurse practitioner and you are in practice. And so the purpose of this series is to kind of talk about all the different roles that you can have in nursing. So that's what we've been doing the last couple of weeks. And yeah, so I thought we'd start with an easy question for you. You ready?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So before I ask that question, I just want to let anyone out there that's out in the audience that might be watching this, you can, if you watch it live with us, you can pop a question up. We'll put it up on the screen and answer it live. If you're watching it on on the replay, then of course you can still put the question in, and we can go in and answer it later. So please don't feel like you can't ask during this. Is should be interactive, so ask away. All right, Tiffany, are you ready?
I am. Hit me.
Okay. Hit. Well, we can't say that. That'll get us thrown off YouTube.
Oh,
I know. It's one of those things.
so
So
so much censorship.
I
Okay.
know, I know. I want to hear why you got into nursing first, and
Mm,
then I think we should tell everybody kind of how we know each other.
okay. Well, I'm trying to decide whether to share how I decided to go into nursing versus why I decided to go into neonatal nursing. Um,
Ooh.
yeah. They're a little bit one and the same sort of, but I when I was in high school, probably junior year, I felt like I really wanted to go into physical therapy because I was an athlete and I really enjoyed sort of cheerleading people towards getting better. And I thought, hey, this would be a natural thing for physical therapy, right? You just like help people go through their therapy and all of a sudden they're better and they're doing their thing, right?
Right.
Um, but I had a little problem like opening books, like I didn't want to do that. So and then I imagine it's still the case, but at the time, physical therapy programs were extremely competitive, more so than nursing programs, at least where I was living at the time. And so my grades, truly, to be completely transparent, my grades weren't good enough to get into a physical therapy program, and I didn't even apply because I was like, what is the point? But
I don't believe that.
um,
I know
you'd
you've
be
told me this before, but I still have a hard time believing that. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, thank you, I guess, but, it was actually the truth, and the reason I got into nursing, in part, like I said, was because my grades weren't good enough to get into physical therapy,
I
and secondly oh,
that's
sorry.
still just that's still just I mean, it baffles me because you have to have incredible grades in most cases to get into nursing too, so just kind of baffles me. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, but, programs have different stipulations, and some of them look more fervently at your high school grades versus whatever you've
Oh,
done in a junior college in between or something like
sure.
that.
Yeah, that makes
So, yeah. So I didn't, I really honestly didn't even pursue a physical therapy program because about that time my niece was born and she was
Ooh,
probably 36 out of 40 weeks gestation. So she spent
okay.
a little time in the NICU when I went to see her. And, I'm one of six children. So I always had smaller siblings. I always had older siblings. Like kids were sort of my jam growing up.
Where are you in birth order?
I am the peacekeeper. I'm number 4 out of 6.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I guess there's not really a middle.
Mm. Well,
Well,
I technically, I guess I share that with
yeah, you do share that with an
number
older
3.
sibling, right?
Yeah.
Because there's
Yeah.
2 of you in the middle.
He is kind of a peacekeeper too. I hadn't thought about that before, but yeah, 3 and 4, we're kind of the peacekeepers.
Okay.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I was 0 days old when I figured that out. But anyway, so yeah, I saw my niece in this neonatal ICU, and I thought this is an incredible place because these patients are sick, but they're also like healing. And I don't know if you've ever been around a child who's healing, but they have like superpowers. They heal so much faster than adults, and they heal in ways that doctors say they won't heal.
Right.
And I just
Mhm.
knew that I wanted to be around that for the rest of my life. So that's kind of how I fell into nursing, I guess you could
Okay.
say. Um, and yeah, 22 years ago, that's kind of what happened. Well, I guess it was longer than 22 because I've been practicing 22. So
Okay. Okay. Well, that makes sense. So
Mhm.
you went to nursing school, and then how long did you always work in the NICU, or did you work in other areas in nursing before you decided to go back to be a needle natal? I've made up a new term.
Mhm.
A neonatal nurse practitioner. That is really hard to say if
I
you say it
know.
like really fast.
When I'm
Yeah.
talking to my patients, I tell them I'm a baby nurse practitioner. I don't even try to say neonatal. I work 24-hour shifts, so like hour 22, nothing like neonatal comes out of your mouth
Right.
easily. So I'm just like, yeah, I'm the baby
Yeah,
nurse
it
practitioner.
is a tongue twister, and
Mhm.
I was telling somebody earlier that we were going to be streaming tonight, and
Mhm.
I said neonatal, and they thought that I said, knee and Nate. They were like, "What's a knee and Nate?" Knee and Nate. I was like, "No, no, no."
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, it's a thing.
Yeah.
So, how long were you in nursing? What were you doing? I mean, how did you make the shift into NNP? How about that?
Well, like I said, I was kind of one of those weird nursing students. I knew what I wanted to do before I even darkened the doors of the nursing school.
I don't think that's weird. I mean, I think there are a lot of people that really kinda know what they wanna do, but, then there are other of us that get in there and they're like, "Ooh, I see that.
Yeah.
Oh, squirrel, that looks fun."
Shuffle ball change.
Right?
Whatever it's yeah, yeah. And so that was interesting in and of itself because it was like I was taking, doing my geriatric rotation
Mhm.
or med surge, and I have adult male patients, and I'm just like, I don't want to take care of them. So I just kind of honestly, I just kind of suffered through all of that. But as I was going through nursing school, I was a patient care technician in a labor and delivery unit.
Okay.
So I was around mommies, I was around babies, and then I graduated and I started in a postpartum unit, which is for those of you who are not nurses, that's the unit where mommies and babies sort of convalesce until they're ready to go home. So I was around that patient population. I did that for, I think, my first year fresh out of nursing school. And I tell my students, they're like, oh, I'm going to graduate. Hopefully, I'll get placed right into a neonatal ICU. And if I don't, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I tell them, I say that year experience that I had before I set foot into a higher level nursery stayed with me. The things that I learned at that point stayed with me throughout my entire career because I can stand in a room, and I don't mean this like I'm bragging. That's not what this is. But I can stand in a room full of 30 babies in bassinets and hear them crying and see them moving and kind of be like, no, 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 that one, he has something going on. I don't know what it is, but I know that's not normal, right?
It's the spidey sense, right? So you have the spidey sense.
Yeah, you just
Mhm.
I just had a really good solid year of a ton of well newborn babies, so I
Mhm.
knew what that should smell like, look
Right.
like, walk
Literally.
like, talk like. Yeah,
Literally.
exactly.
Okay. I need to
Yeah,
see a walking newborn.
yeah.
That's interesting.
Those are the ones that you really need to work up because they
Right.
should be walking.
Yeah,
But
there's something going on there.
yeah, so I highly encourage people who are listening who are trying to figure out their path, not to jump right into in a NICU situation, because you do need that baseline knowledge of what a normal newborn looks like, so you can tell the difference, and you can talk to
Sure.
parents and educate them
Mhm.
as well. So I did that. I did postpartum for a year, and then I started training in a what's called a level 2 nursery. So the acuity level, or the level of illness for babies, starts at a level 1, which is basically a normal newborn nursery.
Right.
Babies are generally like 35 to 37 weeks out of a 40-week gestation, sometimes
Mm.
higher, but really not needing anything. Level 2, they might need some antibiotics or some phototherapy for jaundice or something minimal like that. And then level 3 and level 4 nurseries are the more critical babies, the sicker babies, the premature babies, things like that. So I started, after my year in postpartum working with newborns and mommies, I started working in a training in a level 2 nursery.
Mhm.
And then I was there for about a year and got the opportunity to change hospitals and go to a level 3 nursery.
Oh,
And that was hard. Like,
right.
that was the hardest thing I've probably ever done. In fact, um, my colleagues who worked with me at that nursery know this already, but every single day that I went in, I I wasn't sure that I wanted to be there. It was so hard, and it wasn't like, people were like, "Oh, the babies are so sick, so it was hard." I'm like, "No, it's critical care, and
Yeah.
it's micromanaging these teeny tinies that just beat you up for 12 hours, right?"
Right.
So, it was terrible. It was pretty terrible for the entire first year that I was training in a level 3 nursery.
That's gotta be tough, and it just also something that just struck me,
Mm,
of course, I knew this because of, what we do, but, I find it interesting that the levels are inverse
mhm.
to, trauma.
Yeah. That's just to make you have to use your noodle.
Right, right.
Think
So if
about
you're out there
it.
and you don't know what we're talking about, like a
Mm,
level 1 trauma center is like the highest level of care of trauma
mhm.
that you can receive. And those are typically in urban settings in the middle of city centers and have academic units attached to them. So, like a training center for a residency program, something like that. Um, and those are level 1, and then they go up, and the higher the level of a hospital, the lower acuity, the of a patient it can handle. So, it's just very interesting to me that, it's completely backward of that in the
Yeah.
NICU. But anyway, I digress. It's just a interesting aside.
No, absolutely. And, in the NICU world, the longer you're in it, the more distance there is between you and
Sure.
things like trauma level, this and that. So in an inverse way, like you said, you're trying to figure out, they're like, "Oh, well,
Mhm.
there's this mommy who's 24 weeks, and they're gonna take her to the level 1." And you're like, "Level 1? Are you
Level
talking
1.
about the hospital or the nursery? Because she doesn't
Right.
need to deliver in a level 1 nursery," you know? So, yeah,
That's
you just kind
that's
of
an interesting point. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I every day of that year, I said to myself, I don't want my CV or my resume to look like Swiss cheese, so I'm gonna tough it out for 1 year. And if it's still terrible on day 366, I'm gonna walk in there with my resignation letter and figure it out from there, right?
So it
So I
was leap
walked.
year?
It was it was a leap year. How did you know?
I mean, they're just math. Just math.
I tell people all the time that I'm bad at math. I'm not. I'm bad at math that I don't apply to patient care.
Uh,
So
yeah,
so you don't want me to balance your checkbook, but if
right.
you need your dopamine drip titrated, I'm your girl.
I hear you. Or, do taxes, that's like, no, out. Anyway,
Yeah.
go ahead,
Yeah.
sorry.
No, no. So, I walked in on the 366th day of that leap year and was ready to, like, put my resignation in, and I had the most incredible experience with a patient, where the baby was really sick, and I'm the one who identified that really early on, and the patient's family was so grateful, and, I was like, "Oh, I do know what I'm doing here, like, I can totally do this. This isn't gonna be awful for my whole life." So I stuck with it, and I'm so glad that I did, because that was let's see, that would have been in the year 2002, I think. Which is weird because I was only 10 years old. But
Math. Yeah, I was like, math, that would have made me, maybe, I don't know, 12.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. No.
But yeah,
We'll
yeah,
we'll go with that. Not
yeah. But decades ago, plural, and
Oh,
I
that's terrible.
I I
I hate to
yeah,
hear that. No,
yeah,
I mean, it's great that you've been in practice for a long time. It's just it's very hard to hear. When I think
yeah,
20 years ago, I
yeah.
think like 1980.
Where'd the time go?
Right. Anyway,
I
go ahead.
know. Well, if you're done with your Rubik's cube,
Yeah.
I'll take a I'll take a turn.
I've got one.
Me
It's,
too.
back right over there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I'm glad that I stuck through that because more recently I work in a level 4 nursery, which is a very interesting place in terms of the types of diseases that you see and genetic anomalies and things like that. And I wouldn't trade it. Like it's at this point it's been my life's work and it's been really tough, but it's been so rewarding.
Right.
And I honestly don't know what I would do if I did anything else. I mean, yeah, okay, play music. Okay, well,
Right.
take that off the table. I don't know. I don't know what I would do,
Yeah, for
honestly.
those of
It
you
would
who
be
don't know, if you know Tiffany, you know this. If you don't, and you're just watching this, you just found this. Tiffany's quite a little rock star too. So
yeah,
yeah,
some
you
days.
can maybe Google that. And you'll find her.
Yeah, yeah. Back in the day.
Back in the day. That's okay. I mean, I love your music. I think it's amazing. So before we talk about how you made the leap into actually becoming an NNP and what that looked like for you and how you made that decision and, all all the things that go with that. You want to tell everybody how we know each other?
Huh. Well, I think it was the red light district in Amsterdam.
That's the wrong story.
Oh, that's a different Tracy. That's a
That's a
totally different Tracy.
totally different Tracy. Different
So,
story.
we let's see. I interviewed you. In fact, we used to teach at the same university, and
Yeah.
I was part of the committee that interviewed you. And I won't even hold any bars here. I was like, her. I want her because like you're just it's a southern thing too. You're so kind and like, yes, ma'am, thank you for that question, ma'am, to everybody. And I was like, I just want to work with nice people.
Oh, so funny. You're so funny. No, we did work together and
Yeah.
we also started a little something that we've had on hiatus for a couple of months because of life, right?
Yes. Yes.
But we also have a podcast together called Stirring the Shot.
Yeah.
So that's something that you all should check out. We've got a few episodes up that we haven't put out any in a couple of months because, like I said, life. But we have a plan, and we'll have several more episodes coming out soon. But yeah, Tiffany and I we go way, but we also our paths crossed and didn't even know it. We both earned two graduates from the same university, but one of us happened to be a couple of years ahead of the other one. So we're not going to talk about that, but yeah. So our paths crossed for a while. But anyway, that's the reason I asked her to come and do this because she has such a wealth of experience, and I know her on multiple different levels. So I know this story, but I want to hear like what made you decide to go from bedside working in the types of nurseries that you were in the level 4s, level 3s as a bedside nurse
Yeah.
and in those high acuity areas to a nurse practitioner. Why the jump?
That's another similar story to bad grades, except it wasn't bad grades. It was money that time, honestly. So I've always kind of kept my ear to the ground. And I don't mean this like in a like a new agey way, but like I always kind of listen to what is happening in terms of things lining up and maybe you're supposed to do this, maybe you're supposed to do that kind of thing. And I was working in a NICU in Tennessee, and I was there predominantly for music and medicine. I could do both in Nashville, Tennessee, and seemed like a natural fit for me. So I was working in a NICU, and it's an academic center, and people were like, "Oh, well, are you going to get your NNP like everybody else who just started here?" And I was like,
Because that's what we do.
"Yeah, it's definitely the culture, especially in that NICU in the
Yeah.
academic center." So I was like, "No, I mean, I love my job as a bedside nurse. I get to spend all this time with the families and cuddling babies. By the way, we do so much more than cuddle babies, but that is, you got to feed them, and then you don't just like slam them in his bed. You got to sit there and cuddle them a little bit, right?"
I mean,
So,
that would be an amazing job. Like,
mhm,
I could do that. Now, like, taking care of a little baby, that terrifies me,
yeah,
other than just, like, feeding, burping,
yeah,
changing, those things. But, like, all the other stuff that you do, like, hats off.
yeah. I mean, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I have a 2-month-old nephew, and people are like, "Oh, you should take a moment and do some meditation and some self-care." I'm like, "Nope, hand me that fat baby. I just wanna sit down and cuddle." And it's like it's totally therapy, and I'm willing to admit that that's maybe weird. But,
I don't think it's weird.
almost every single NICU nurse or NICU practitioner I know is wired up that way. They're like,
Yeah.
I need some fat baby cuddles. Where are they?"
Mhm. I love it.
So, yeah. So anyway, my colleagues were like, "Are you gonna pursue your master's and become an NNP?" And I'm like, "I wasn't really planning on it." And they're like, "Well, there's tuition reimbursement, there's scholarships, there's this, there's that." And essentially, when it all calculated out, it was like I could get my master's degree for $3,000 basically after all of
That
those things.
that just
Yeah.
I mean, that
Yeah.
just good for you.
Yeah.
That's all I'm gonna say. Good for you.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I just thought it would be really silly to walk away from that,
Sure.
opportunity and to learn in an incredible center like that. So that's what I did.
Mhm.
And the similar thing happened for my doctorate. I was
Mhm.
looking around and looked at a couple of different universities, and people say you're not supposed to get your degree, your master's and your doctorate from the same university, but my alma mater was like, "Hey, do you like dump trucks full of money?" And I'm like, "I do." So financially,
Yeah.
I couldn't walk away from that.
Mhm.
So I ended up getting my master's and my doctorate from the same place, and I loved it.
Yeah,
And
I did the same thing, same place,
mhm.
but minus the dump trucks of money. Somehow I missed that train. But yeah, that's a whole other topic that I'm gonna talk about when I go up there for reunion, which is
Mhm.
coming up in October.
Mhm.
But anyway, so that's interesting. How long did it take you to get your NNP? So you got
I
your master's first. So
Mhm. Yeah. And
by
you
the
said for your
way,
boards.
when we did that, well, I guess it was kind of coming out when you got yours. When I got my
Mhm.
master's, there was no such thing as BSN to DNP because there was
Yeah.
no DNP.
Yeah, yeah.
So, DNP didn't come out for a couple more years after I got my master's, but
Yeah.
I think by the time you came around, that was a thing, but maybe just starting.
Yeah.
Most of the programs were still BSN to MSN, so bachelor's to master's.
Yeah.
And then if you wanted to go on for DNP, it was traditional MSN to DNP. So
Yeah.
how long did it take you to get your master's? Did you go full time?
I believe I did go full time, and the reason I don't remember is because I was working nights, about 4 or 5 night shifts a week, and I was attending an online program, but it was there on campus, so there were always, like, several of my colleagues in the NICU were also in the program, so we would work night shift, and, in our downtime, we would be like, "How do we do this genetics pedigree thing?" And,
Mhm.
sort of powwow off of each other, but
Right.
so I did do it full time. I don't remember a whole lot of that part of my life because it was so much work, working that
Mhm.
much in the NICU, and then going full time. There were benefits, there were scholarships available for students that went full time. And again, I was like, well, I'm young. I can sleep when I die, and this opportunity is here. So let's do this. So I
And
think
there's
it was a
coffee.
yeah, absolutely.
There's always coffee.
Absolutely. So I think it probably took me, I think it's a 3-semester program, I believe. So I started in 2009 and I was done by June of 2010. So I think it was January 2009 to June of 2010 or
Oh,
August 2010. something like that.
So when
It
I
was
was
real.
graduating with my doctorate, you were graduating with your master's.
Mhm.
I don't know why I thought you graduated like in 14.
I thought you were only a couple of years ahead of me, but maybe a few more.
Oh, who knows? Anyway, well, that makes
Math.
me feel better. But I got my master's in 2005, so it
Okay.
had been a minute, and then I went back in 2008 because that was
Mhm.
the first year they
Mhm.
had the DNP program. But anyway, we're not here to talk about that.
Yeah.
So what did you think? I mean, tell me about, I know you don't remember a whole lot about it, but as far as like logistics, but I know
Mhm.
that you remember about the content and about how, what was the difficulty factor? What advice would you give to someone thinking of going to an NP school?
Well, first and foremost, I would not recommend trying to work full-time plus night shift,
Same. I did the same
50,
thing.
60 hours a week
It's
while
stupid.
trying to I mean, the only thing that really saved me was my experience as a nurse before that.
Yeah.
I had like 8 or 9 years of experience in a NICU
Hmm.
before that. And what happens in your master's degree, a lot of people don't understand the difference between the two in terms of the content. But in your
Hmm.
master's degree, it is so much content. It is in every
It's
orifice that you
ton.
have, just shoving content for the duration of the
I
program.
mean, you're
So,
not wrong. You're not wrong, and when
yeah,
I say it was stupid, I mean, it was stupid of me to try to do that. That was very
yeah,
hard on me. Some people
yeah,
don't have a choice,
yeah.
and they have to work like that, and I totally understand and
Mhm,
respect that.
mhm.
So when I say that, I meant like it was a stupid decision for me because it
Yeah,
was it was it was really hard on me. It was hard on my
yeah,
body, it was hard on my mind. I get that sometimes people have to work, but,
mhm,
really, if you can get away with working less or even not at all, some people just can't do that. I totally get
yeah,
it, but if you can just cut back to part-time, I think that's so much more
yeah,
conducive to the type of schedules that we have in NNP programs.
yeah. And the funny thing is, like, I remember my colleagues, most of them had a gaggle of young children at
A
home, and I
gaggle.
didn't. One gaggle. And so I'm like, "This
One
is
gaggle.
so hard. I'm so tired," like, and they're doing everything I'm doing and have like a whole short bus full of children to take care of. And so that happened. The stupid universe just was like, "You can stop crying now." That happened every single time I felt overwhelmed. Like, one of my colleagues would come up and be like, "Oh, yeah, like 6 of my kids have lice," or whatever it was. And I'm like, "I'm such a
6
loser."
of my kids, oh my gosh. Well, I wanna try to make you feel bad. I gave birth during my
Yeah,
master's program.
you're one
I
of those.
actually was in clinic that day, so I was in clinicals. I
Mhm.
was not in a clinic, I was in clinicals in a hospital and worked all day in clinicals and then checked myself in at 5 PM and then gave birth and went back to school 2 days later. At
Did
the
they give you a
time
medal?
Yeah, I know. At the time and for many years, I wore it like a badge, and now I look back and
Mhm.
go, "I will not allow a student to do that."
Yeah.
If as a professor, still practice, but as a
Yep.
professor, I would not and because I would work with them, like, I wouldn't keep them out or say, "You can't come back this semester." No, I wouldn't
Yeah.
do that, but I would work with them so that they could finish, but still have a decent schedule because that was rough, that was hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my
Anyway.
my most difficult story, this is so dumb. I hate even saying this out loud because people have real problems. And I was like, I worked a night shift. I think it was like my fourth in a row, and I was supposed to do a small tour with my band, and like those were becoming few and far between the further
Right.
into the program I got.
Mhm.
So, one morning I got off shift. My bass player had flown into Nashville, got in my car, drove me to our first show of the tour was in Cleveland, so he drove the entire way while I slept in the in the back of the SUV, and we started our tour from there. And I don't even remember where else we went from there. I know that it was a little bit of like a winery tour, so we were kinda just hitting wineries as we went, but, I don't
Yeah, there's
remember.
nothing wrong with this plan so far. You've got somebody else driving, you're hitting up wineries, you're
Yeah,
jamming and playing good music, like,
yeah,
I'm yet to hear the
yeah.
downside.
Yeah. I mean, this is me, big, crybaby. And
Like, yeah, there's nothing to cry about here. So
mm-mm.
what was the hardship?
I don't remember it. It was just, I don't remember the entire tour. They're like, "You remember that time we went
Oh,
to like the Cleveland Rock Hall of Fame?" And they were like, "Oh, we put your album over here." And I'm like, "What?" Like, I don't remember any of that. The whole band has to constantly tell me what we did on that tour. I have no idea. And that's kind of how that whole 2 years or 18 months or whatever it was, that's how it was. And obviously, like, patient outcomes, patient care depends on you, like, not being dead on your feet while you're trying to learn this information. But like I said, um, your master's degree is just so much content. So for example, as a NICU nurse for 8 or 9 years, I knew what a bad blood gas looked like, right? But I didn't
right.
understand how to fix it. I just was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, somebody needs to look at these bad numbers," and that was it.
These are
So,
really, really bad, bad,
yeah,
bad. I don't
yeah.
know what they mean, but
So,
I know they're bad. Well,
yeah.
and I guess it just depends because there are a lot of nurses that, I mean, if there are a lot of nurses that absolutely know what it means and what to do for it.
Mhm.
Um, Not that you didn't,
No,
but,
yeah. Yeah.
it's just it's but I get what you're saying because it's not necessarily in the scope to
Yeah.
do something about it even if you know about it, right?
Right, right.
Of a
Yeah, I
nurse.
mean, I didn't full well understand like the pathophysiology going on behind those
Sure.
numbers or ventilator mechanics or anything like that. So I tell people that your master's degree, your brain as you go into your master's degree is really like Swiss cheese. And the goal of your master's program is to fill in the holes of that cheese. So, like I said, given my experience before that, and then just sort of filling in those holes, I was able to work it out. But again, like you asked me, advice that I would give somebody, I would just say, change your life so that not that that becomes your priority because your family should be your priority, but
Right.
there's a way to do that where you're setting yourself up for ultimate success instead
Mhm.
of just sort of white knuckling it all the way through. So that's
Yeah.
what I would
That
say first
Oh,
and
you're
foremost.
so right. You're so right. I
Mhm,
mean, there's so many things that you can do and, studying and
mhm,
making sure that you're supported if you can, like, get really if somebody and this is the thing that I just did not do well, and I should have, but if somebody offers you some help,
mhm,
like, in any way, like study help or watching a kid so you can take a nap or study or whatever it is,
mhm,
don't say, "Oh, no, that's okay." Take the help.
mhm.
Take it. Take
Yeah.
it, because they wanna be part of your success story and don't deny them that, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
anyway, I'm gonna jump off my soapbox. Let's shift let's shift because, I know what a lot of the viewers like to know, especially when they're thinking about joining, a new profession or maybe going into a different direction within their profession. What do you do? So, what's a day in the life? What does a neonatal nurse practitioner do? What's a day in your life? Walk us through that.
Yeah, so if you are a layman asking me that question, I usually tell people that I can do just about anything that a neonatologist does at the bedside. So, writing orders, doing assessments, making plans for the day, that kind of thing. That's what we do. We don't do surgeries. We do procedures like placing umbilical lines or circumcisions, things like that. But aside from, you know, opening a
Hold up, you
chest,
do circumcisions?
I don't. I was taught to, but my practice
Okay.
doesn't. I practice in Florida. It's the turtle in the race. So
Oh, well,
there's a lot of things in Florida that you can't do as a practitioner that
okay.
you can do in other places. Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
just, I don't know why, it never occurred to me that that was part
Yeah.
but, I'm an acute care nurse practitioner, I
Yep.
don't deal with little things. If
Hmm.
they're like this, they go away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And it's a scope of practice thing and each state is different. But like in Tennessee, my practitioner friends do circumcisions very routinely.
right,
So that's not something that I do in my practice in Florida, but yeah, so first part of the day, it starts out much like bedside nursing. We have our sign out report, our handoff. And
Mhm.
then we do what's called pre-rounds, where you look at the patient's vitals and their weight change and their intake and output for the last 24 hours. And you kind of evaluate their disease processes and their process, their progress, and kind of
Right.
make a plan for them for the
Yeah.
day.
So where
So
are they? Right. Where are
yeah,
they? And okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
So if I have a teeny tiny premature baby and their electrolytes are a little skewed, then is that because I'm giving them too much fluid or too little fluid? Do I have to dial that down
Mhm.
a bit?
Mhm.
Are they not growing the way that they should? Which is symmetrical, right? You want their head to grow at the same pace as their body. So I would adjust their feedings accordingly, increase their calories, maybe things like that. Um, then we round with the team. There's usually respiratory therapists, a neonatologist, there's a nutritionist. I'm forgetting lots of them, but
Pharmacist.
there's a whole team.
There's a
And
lot of
we
this.
yeah, we a lot of ists.
What
There's
is here
residents.
today?
Yeah. So we just talk about each patient at the bedside and discuss their progress over the past 24 hours and what our short-term and long-term plan is for them. And we write orders as we go, and then we write a progress note talking about all of the things that we discussed in rounds. And then we find some parents if they weren't part of rounds. We find them and update them and try to do some education. And the one part about being a practitioner versus being a bedside nurse that I am remiss about is we don't have any cuddles. We don't get any cuddle time unless,
What?
the I don't know, the cuddle gods like break the cloudy skies open and the sun starts shining and we find time to cuddle babies, but we don't have the same
I'm very
rapport.
disappointed to learn
I
that.
know. We don't have the same we don't have the same FaceTime with the parents that you do as a bedside nurse, and
Sure.
we don't
Yeah,
have the
I
same
understand that. Mhm.
cuddle time, which is that was part of what I really loved about being a bedside nurse. But the one thing about being a practitioner that I appreciate is when I was a bedside nurse, and you're just taking care of this baby and he's just looking at you like, man, I don't feel good. And he's just a little left of center. And you go to your
Mhm.
practitioner, your doc, and you're like, he's just not acting like himself. I can't put my finger on it. I don't really have anything substantial to tell you, but he's just giving me the side eye and I trust him.
Right.
Right.
Mhm. This one's squirrely.
Yeah. Well, when you're a
Yeah.
bedside nurse, you can't do a dang thing about that. And lots of
Right.
times you're talking to somebody who doesn't know the baby like you do. So you're literally battling it out. You're advocating for this baby and you can't do a
Mhm.
thing about
Right.
it other than support them through whatever it is until
Mhm.
they declare themselves as sick, sick, sick. But as a
Right.
practitioner, you can do something about that.
Mhm.
And typically, when a bedside nurse comes to me and says, "This kid's giving me side eye," I'm like, "Okay, let's figure this
Let's
out."
let's go look.
Right?
Let's go look. Yeah,
Yeah.
I often said there was, I used to get the kind of the same it's
Hmm.
like a sixth sense, like the little, "No, something's just not right here, so we need to look at this a little bit closer," and through the years, I developed relationships working with some of the nursing staff,
Hmm.
and there were a couple that if they called me, like, I don't care what was going on, I dropped it
Yeah.
and I was there because I was like, "Okay, if you're worried, there's a
Yep.
problem."
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Yep.
Mhm. So you
Get the.
kind of touched on it a little bit,
Mhm.
but tell me what you love the most about being a neonatal NP. What do you love the most?
I think this is a little bit cheesy, but I used to think
I
that the
love cheese.
biggest cheese is delicious,
I love
especially
cheese.
with wine.
Yeah, I love
Um,
Gouda cheese.
I used to think that the ultimate for me, like the moment where I would just kind of be ready ready to die, like I'm good, I've had a full life, is like I would be playing a show, just sitting there and playing my guitar, set my guitar down, and somebody comes to the front of the stage and says, "You took care of me when I was a baby." And it's like, I don't know, a 4-year-old. No, like like somebody who's,
A 4-year-old?
fully functioning, like intelligent, like productive member of society, whatever, 16, 18, whatever. And they're like, you took care of me when I was a baby. I'm like, okay, now
Uh,
you're at my rock show. That's a little weird, but
yeah.
yeah, you go, you know,
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing.
yeah,
Well, I mean, that's kind of hard to top,
yeah.
but let's think about it from the opposite direction. So, what's the one thing about your job that's like the biggest drag? The thing that you're just, and I don't mean like all the current climate with staffing and all that business, but
Sure.
like the role of a neonatal NP. What is the worst thing?
It's hard to narrow it down, which sounds funny. The longer I do this, people have their own like little things that bother them, right?
Sure.
And I think the thing that gets me in trouble the most is comparing NICU nurses now. And I do work with some fantastic NICU nurses by and large, but
Mhm.
there's a small handful that are not superstars, right?
Mhm.
And so I constantly compare what somebody is saying to me in terms of the knowledge and education that they have and passion that they have for NICU nursing with how I was at their stage. So if this is a, NICU nurse who's been practicing for 3 years, what was I like when I had been practicing for 3 years? And if they're like way off center, like
Mhm.
that just tears me up. I mean, of course, as an educator, I'm like, okay, well, I got to do something about this, but it's 2:30 in the morning and I've been up for 20 hours or whatever it is. So that's hard. I mean, if you're not going to let me get on my soapbox about the red tape, because honestly, just like most nurse practitioners, we just want to get in the door and take care of our patients. We don't want to
Yeah.
like deal with all the so and so, said that you weren't wearing your badge because you took it off to go to the bathroom or whatever, all of the nonsense is, right? Like we just want to get to the bedside and take care of
Or
patients.
Bungate.
Yeah. Yeah.
God forbid we
I
have a
know.
messy bun on top of our head. I'm like, I'm sorry. That's the only way that I know how to practice. Like, if I don't have this hair and a bun on top
Mhm.
of my head,
Yeah.
I don't think that my brain cells would even work.
Nope. And
So,
it's totally relevant to your patient outcomes. Okay.
absolutely. My
Exactly. I mean,
it
that's the precise kind of red tape that I'm talking about.
yeah,
Like,
my top bun absolutely channels knowledge like an antenna.
yeah. I look like a Fraggle with my top bun.
I
And
love it.
I'm not ashamed, but
No, God,
yeah.
no. Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, if I'm not gonna get on that soapbox, you know, it's the other
No, I
ways.
mean, you can get on that soapbox. I was just meaning, like every
Mhm.
and I don't mean to say that it's not important because it certainly is, but we
Yeah.
all know that staffing right now across the country is
Mhm.
challenging, and that actually bleeds over when there is a lack of bedside nursing into our role. It makes it super, super difficult when you're trying to work as an NP because, we're nurses first, right?
Mhm.
So we get in there and we are doing the NP role, but are absolutely also doing nursing care roles, which is totally fine.
Yeah.
But it's just not something that you can do. Although you can't be the nurse and the NP, just like RN say they can't be the CNA and the RN
Mhm.
all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so we all know that that is a super hot topic right now. Definitely
Mhm.
something we need to talk about over on the podcast. So
Yeah.
when and our next we'll put that out probably in the
Yeah.
next few weeks. We'll get one of those out. But anyway, as far as the role, like the the duties of the role, not necessarily the climate around the role
Mhm.
right now. What is, for me, I don't know. I've never worked in your world, but I've worked in the ER for a long time,
Mhm.
and fetal demise or a baby that dies or small child that dies or
Mhm.
it's always so much more difficult for me to process, but I'm not around that a lot. So,
Yeah.
um I don't know. I think I was thinking maybe something like what is the hardest part about your job that you really don't that's hard to, hell, I don't know how to answer the question.
Well, I'll get right on it. Well, it's interesting that it's interesting to me, and hopefully it's interesting to you, that when you're asking me about the good, bad, and the ugly, I didn't talk about patient demise. And I know outside of the NICU world, people are like, "Oh, you work in the NICU? That must be so hard. Like, how do you deal with, a patient passing and stuff like that?"
Right.
But honestly, it doesn't happen that often.
Mhm.
And I used to tell people two things. One is you have to have sort of uh, some kind of basis, some kind of foundation that gets you through a difficult situation like that. So for me, it was religion. Like, and
Sure.
in my religion, babies go to heaven, and
Right.
like that's way better than staying here and being poked by me 12 times while I'm trying to get this IV in or something like that, right?
Sure.
You just have to find your compass and help that guide you through those difficult situations. But also, I forgot the other thing that I always tell people that I that I started to say.
Part 2
But
is always the hardest one to remember.
yeah, I think point B, I think is that yes, we do see some things that you totally want to unsee in the NICU and can't, but the things that we see that are wins are like superhero wins. Like,
Right.
the baby will be extremely premature and the doctor's like, "Oh, there's no way he's going to make it." And then he does, and he probably grows up to be president and like does all these amazing things, right? So, I love this patient population because of that. But like I said, the highs, if you will, of patient care in this patient population are so much brighter than the
Mhm.
lows. And like I said, we don't lose patients that often. We're really good at keeping babies around and alive, and even sometimes when we probably shouldn't. But technology is very advanced, and we're not as good at growing babies as mommies are, but we're good enough, and a lot of babies actually survive. So
Yeah, and that's
yeah.
amazing, and to that point, we had a question come in. I want to pop it up here. Denise McGuire asks, I'm going to turn and read it. How do you keep your nursing identity? Do you ever come across NNPs that have lost it? That's a great question.
I think she's referring to NMPs that kind of lose their spice.
Yeah, lose their why.
Yeah.
You lose their
Um,
focus.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think that has to do with your foundation and your support system, and the ways that you sort of rejuvenate yourself. I'm not going to say self-care because I think that's way overused, but what do you do when you're not being a nurse practitioner, right? For me, it's playing music or being on the beach, or I also do a lot of races athletically. So I'm usually training for those kinds of things, and whatever I can do really to turn my brain off. My friends always tease me because when they're like, "Hey, let's play a game," and I'm like, "Okay, cool," and they're like, "Let's play Settlers of Catan, where it's all this strategy and you have to like think and and I'm like, "No, let's just get this cup and throw these rubber pigs on a on a scoreboard and get points." Like, I can't use my brain when I'm not at work. Like, I don't that is not relaxing
Like,
to me, right?
you're
I
like,
can't
no, no, that's not a thing. We're not
no,
doing that.
not
Yeah,
strategizing a thing.
that's a great question, Denise. Thanks for asking that. But yeah, I think that it's common these days that people kind of have lost their why in some situations. But I'm hopeful that through things like this and through supporting each other and, like Tiffany said, really making sure that you're taking that time to invest back in yourself, making yourself priority, understanding when you're in a toxic situation,
Mhm.
and what to do to make sure that you are not in a toxic situation,
Yeah.
that you take those steps is super important, especially for mental health these days. So thank you for that question. It was a great question. So go ahead, Tiffany.
Well, I was just gonna add, I think I was gonna say NMPs, but I don't think it's exclusive of NMPs. But nurses work a lot. We enjoy working generally. We enjoy going on vacations, which comes from, it's funded by working a lot.
By
So
working extra shifts.
right. And things have been completely sideways through the duration of the pandemic. So we really, somebody told me about, well, on one of our podcast episodes, actually, that the way that they sort of mitigate, the loss of identity, so to speak, is they don't work overtime anymore, because
Yeah.
they can't.
Yeah, you have to draw boundaries. I made a decision, a little over a year ago, or right around a year ago, that I was reclaiming my time because I'd sacrificed so much of my time after what would be considered normal working hours, and
Mhm.
I've done that, and it's been amazing. It's been
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
If you can do it. I get that there are some times that you can't, but, reclaiming your time and really reinvesting
yeah,
is in yourself, I think, is so key right now, especially
mhm,
when so many places um, and situations are kind of taking advantage of nurses
yeah,
and nurse practitioners. But
yeah,
again, that's the topic for our podcast.
yeah,
So here's a question that everybody wants to know, and you can give me generalities. You don't have to
yeah,
tell me for you specifically.
yeah. It is naturally curly.
Yeah. And your natural color? Because that would be the
Uh,
next question.
Today, yes, more or less.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I can't say any of that. So how much money can a new neonate new a new
Neonatal.
thank you, that nurse
Yeah.
practitioner expect to make? And I know it's different in different regions. And then
Mhm.
what is the difference between a new grad NNP and perhaps someone with several years? And is there a difference in maybe level of nursery, those sorts of things?
Yep, absolutely. So,
Talk talk money to me.
show me the money.
Show me the money. All about the money. All
Yeah.
about the Benjamins.
So I do like to look at this information online every once in a while because I find myself in different scenarios where I need to know that information. And I found it interesting. I was looking online before this interview, and I was seeing things like neonatal nurses, neonatal. Now I'm doing it. Dang. Neonatal nurse practitioners are some of the highest paid nurse practitioners. And they were talking about the salaries. And I was like, okay, no, we're not. So what I would say is if you Google that information, there's a couple of places to look where I feel like in my own practice, comparing that to what I'm reading seems pretty spot on. And then there were other things that I was reading that really were not. For the articles that were saying that neonatal nurse practitioners were of the highest paid, they were saying that they generally start out at about $110,000 a year. And again, that depends on, the level of nursery, like you mentioned, the level of the hospital system that you work for. For example, I work for a hospital system right now where I may work in Orlando one day and in Stewart, Florida the next day. So we cover lots of different nurseries. So that goes into your salary as well as your number of years of experience. So what what I would share with you is a really good place to look for that kind of information, that an organization that kind of really has their finger on the pulse of that kind of information is the neonatal, we call it NAN, but they put out a neonatal nurse practitioner workforce survey every couple of years, and they have their newest one out came out in 2020, and they were saying that new grads generally earn anywhere from 110 to $120,000 a year, and then on the other side of the spectrum, with like 30 years experience or more, which is only about 20% of the already very small population of neonatal nurse practitioners, they make about 134,000 a year. But I have to tell you that number does not seem accurate for the nurse practitioners that I work with that have that level of experience. They usually make quite a bit more than that. The
Right.
reason I think that may be skewed is that workforce survey goes out to like 6 or 7,000 neonatal nurse practitioners, and they usually render somewhere around 1,000 responses. So the data is going to be a little bit skewed from that,
Mhm.
depending on what those demographics look like for those participants that are completing the survey. So
Yeah, I was going to say, I imagine that there is quite a difference between
Mhm.
perhaps someone working in California, New York,
Yep.
or
Mhm.
somebody working in Kansas or Florida or Alabama, or,
Yep.
so geographic location is going to
Mhm.
play a lot into that. And even
Yep.
in Florida, I know, and I know there's a huge difference in the rural and urban settings
Mhm.
and salary. So it kind of that is an average. So what
Yeah.
you have just quoted is an average. And then did I get the name of this right? I just popped this up here. So if people want to Google that, they can find it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see. It's the 2020 Neonatal Nurse Practitioner Workforce Summary, Survey rather, an
Okay.
executive summary. And it's the National Association of Neonatal Nurse Practitioners, or
Okay.
NAN. So
Okay.
or NANP, I think it's NANP, which is not what that looks like when you spell it, but
Yeah, I spelled it out and then I took it off because I thought,
Mhm.
no, no, not gonna put that on here. But people can Google this and they can find it. So,
Yep, yep,
here you go. Or, actually, if you give me the link, I'll put the link
yeah,
down in the show notes.
yep.
So,
Show
that'll
notes.
show notes.
Oh, wrong program, wrong program.
I know, now I've got the itch, but anyway,
Yeah.
that's something we do on our podcast anytime we mention show notes. But anyway, um, so I can put them down in the show notes or down in the description, as they call it in the YouTube land.
Oh,
And that way people can get to that survey if they're interested.
yeah.
So, what advice do you have for somebody who wants to, let's say they're a bedside nurse, they've been in the NICU or not, whatever, but they want to go down this path. What's your advice?
They're already a bedside nurse? Is that what you said?
I mean, they can be, they don't have to be. I'm thinking it's probably more likely that they have already decided that this is something that they're working and they want to
Yeah,
do. But it's possible maybe they are getting their BSN right now and are
yeah,
thinking about their next steps and what would that look like?
yeah,
So what's your advice?
yeah. So I pretty much try to recruit every single person, every single nursing student that I meet. I pretty much try to recruit them into the neonatal world because I've enjoyed it so much. And we're not that nurses in other units and things like that aren't silly, but I think NNPs and neonatal nurses are like the silliest of all. Hilarious, silly people. So it's a good time, number 1.
It's a good time. That makes sense. Yeah, if you come to my world in the ER, we are silly, but we're silly in a weird, scary way,
Yeah.
that is off-putting to some people because they're
Yeah.
like, "Wait, what?"
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. We're weird. We're not that off-putting. We're warm and fuzzy, but also hilarious people. So it's a good time, number 1. Number
Mhm.
2, I have a lot of students who are trying to figure out whether they should go BSN to MSN, get their master's, or BSN to DNP or whatever, or PhD, whatever their big plans are.
Right.
And I tell them I'm totally biased because I did it in stair steps. I got my associates and I was working while I was working on my bachelor's, and then I think I took maybe a year off where I was working in the NICU before I decided to be thrown into the master's program. And then I definitely took a few years off before I went and did my doctoral work, but I'm biased and I tell them you kind like of course somebody can get their BSN to DMP because they do that all the time, right? Is that the
Right.
is that the best way? And I don't mean to use the word best, but is that the way that's going to set you up for the most success?
Mhm.
Probably not, because you really in a intensive care unit for neonates, it's really going to help you to have some practical application, some you know clinical experience behind you as you pursue your DNP or your PhD.
Sure. And I
So
I can see a situation perhaps where maybe a student, even though we just got finished saying don't work a lot, but if they are working some,
mhm,
yeah, as an RN and as a BSN in the NICU, then maybe that path would be less arduous or difficult
yep,
than perhaps someone who doesn't do that at all.
Yeah.
But, I mean, putting on my educator hat here, whoop,
Mhm,
whoop, like that. Isn't that
mhm.
pretty? I love
That
the way
is a
that that
big,
looks.
feathery
It
New
looks
Orleans
great in
style
this
hat.
light. I mean, I have to be honest, like, this hat looks amazing in this light,
It
but
does, it does.
but putting on my educator hat, I can tell you that a lot of the NNP programs that are across the country require that
Mhm.
experience. So
Yep.
it's NNP is a little different of a bird than perhaps some of the other NP specialties, nurse practitioner specialties. So I can tell you with almost 99% confidence that that is a requirement to actually
Yep.
get into a program that you have some sort of NICU experience. So
Yeah. I'm almost positive that they all have a requirement of at least 2 to 3 years of full-time NICU experience, and if they don't, you
yeah,
probably wanna look at a different program, honestly.
I mean, there's
But,
that.
it makes sense, right? If
Yeah.
you're pursuing, like, an adult, acute care practitioner degree, adults are walking around all over the place, right? So you learn something in school, and then you walk out of a classroom, and you're like, "Hey, there's an adult," and you think through what you just learned, and there's somebody
Well,
standing right there, right? I
sometimes
mean,
an age.
I'm not saying you just, like, start assessing them, but
Well, I mean,
to
we all do that anyway, but yeah, adult is a relative term. You're going to have to be very specific with those parameters because I
um,
encounter people of the adult age all the
mhm.
time that, yeah, not so much. But anyway,
Your ER nurse is showing.
I'm sorry. I can't. I thought I put it under the hat. Oh,
Oh, you put on a different hat. Yeah,
I know.
so you don't see these little teeny tiny 24 weekers walking around in the general populace, right?
No.
So it definitely helps to have some clinical experience under your belt and also a little bit if you can work per diem or part-time while you're studying, that also helps. So,
Hmm. Yeah. No, I completely agree with that, and I can only imagine how important it would be because you're right. Even when you go to nursing school and you're getting your undergrad, whether it's AD, LPN,
mhm,
RN, ADN, BSN, whatever it is, I mean, any of the levels in undergrad, there's just not. I mean, if you're lucky, you have one neonate mannequin,
yep,
and if you have any neonate experience at all, when you get out of school, it's shocking. You might
yeah,
go into a level 4 nursery, or I'm
mhm.
sorry, a level 1 nursery. See? It's the
You did
thing.
it. You
I
did it
did it.
again. That's
I
alright.
did it again. So you might go into, like, the easy baby nursery
Yeah,
or
yeah.
postpartum care as a rotation in undergrad, but other than that, I mean, really, NICU experience is they're a tight-knit group. They're like,
Yeah, yeah,
you can't come in here." They're
yeah. I
very
mean,
picky about their babies.
for your master's degree, 600 clinical hours goes by like a blink of an eye.
Well, they've
So,
upped that now. Now it's 750.
they're working on it. It's not totally the deal for NMPs just yet. It may become, but,
It will.
mhm,
It's next, I think 24, or I'd
yeah,
have to look it up again, don't quote me. But,
yeah,
yeah, it has been made the
mhm,
norm. It's just
right,
now when is it gonna be implemented? So, if you're
yeah.
thinking of going back to school, go now.
Yeah, absolutely. But still, like, a
But
difference of
still, 750
150
is not
hours.
bad. That's
Yeah.
I mean, that's actually really good.
Yeah, but and I'm sad to say this, but you can log 600 hours without ever trying to intubate a baby, right? Because the opportunity doesn't present itself.
And
You could
that
go
just amazes me, but
yeah. I mean, that's what simulation is there to help with,
well,
right? But
that's true. It's to help with that, but
mhm,
now education is changing a little bit,
mhm,
and that there are 750 hours, but it's also competency based.
yeah.
So there will be certain competencies that have to be reached, and without again, without putting on my educator hat, I can tell you that I completely agree with this.
Yeah.
I feel like we kind of had that before. Like when I got my master's, they said you had to have so many of these, so many of that, this many hours, whatever.
Mhm.
And then it just kind of when I got into education as an educator, not as a educatee, student, whatever it
Yeah.
is, it was different. So,
Yeah.
I'm glad that we're kind of swinging the pendulum back that
Yeah.
way. I think it's super important.
It is. I just don't know how feasible it is because if you think about your personal practice as a practitioner and think about
Mhm.
your year. So like what's one skill that you rarely see, like a interosseous, insertion, right?
Right.
So is
That's
there an
an IV in the
organization?
bone for those people
Yes.
who are
Sorry.
wondering. IV in the bone.
So like if you had a professional organization that said you have to have 3 interosseous insertions in 1 year, like what happens if you don't? And as the professional, like you're like, that's not going to happen every year, right? So
Mhm.
you have to have simulation to back that up. And I
Mhm.
don't know that increasing those hours is really gonna, I mean, it's like the lottery, right? The more you play, the more likely you are to potentially win, but that
Right.
doesn't mean that's gonna be how that works out. And
Well, I
the
go ahead.
good the sort of flip side of that is I'm sure that this is the same for other types of students, but for neonatal nurse practitioner preceptors, we're like, "Hello, where are you?" We're
Mhm.
already like super, super strapped. So
No, that's true. That's very
I'm
true. So,
afraid, yeah.
yeah, so if you're looking for a program out there, I would do a couple of things. One would be I would look for ones that actually place you clinically, not programs that require you to make your own placements,
Yeah.
because that's almost becoming an obsolete thing
Mhm.
now, because it's so difficult. The competition is so high, not
Yeah.
only among NPs but among PAs and residents, other people. So medical students. Um, so I would look for a program that absolutely places
Mhm.
you clinically, but
Yeah.
that's an aside. I think we have a whole other podcast episode
Yep.
to talk about all of that and the educational requirements, because that
Mhm.
certainly is a thing. But so any last bit of advice besides that?
I don't man, that I don't know. I feel like I spilled all the beans that I
You
had.
spilled the tea. You definitely
I
spilled the tea.
did.
Yeah,
I
for
did.
sure.
I would say one thing I would say is, I was thinking about this earlier today, when I was looking over those salaries,
Mhm.
because there are things like shift differentials. They're largely, probably, I think it was 46% of people working, as an NNP in like a level 4, 3 or 4 nursery. Those folks were working 24s, 46%. And that's a little bit down from 2016.
Mhm.
So I would say, if you're looking at becoming an NNP, and you go ahead and like succeed at that, I would say really do some shopping in terms
Mhm.
of what your salary is going to be, whether there are shift differentials. We have a lot of
Mhm.
literature that talks about swing shifts where you're working days this week and nights the
Oh,
next.
that's horrible. It's
About
a bad
Yeah,
idea.
yeah, it's so bad for your health. So I would
Mhm.
just say, really shop around, figure out what's going to work best for you and keep you the most healthy and centered, and pursue that. Don't always
Yeah,
follow the dollar sign. So,
that's great advice. And if you would, Tiffany, if you will send me any resources like networking groups or like NapNap, any of the organizations
yeah.
that people should join, or of course the resource for the salaries, the
Mhm.
survey, any of that, if you send that to me, I will add it to our show notes and
Show notes.
show notes, and then people can absolutely look it up for themselves. And I'll
Mhm,
also link a couple of the videos in there that I did that talk about the differences between
mhm,
getting a master's as a nurse practitioner or a DMP, and also the differences between a DMP and a PhD. So we can go
mhm.
back and look at any of those too. But
Yeah.
thank you so much for being here tonight, Tiffany.
Welcome. You're welcome. Thanks for having me. I love
Oh,
to,
this is
talk about this stuff.
yeah, for sure. This has been fun. I'll have you back soon for a different one. But thanks so much for being here, and have a great week.
You too.
All right. Bye, YouTube folks. Be sure to watch the replay and forward to all your friends.